Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terror Podcast, Season 10, Episode 25. He's Dave Bryan, I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being with us this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. And Dave, back-to-back podcasts. That's kind of the reality of a crammed week like this, but good to be back. Lots to talk about.
Yeah, we're on a short week here, but it is Ravens week, so I expect you to act accordingly today.
How is that? How do I act accordingly? Do I gotta go over there and hit you or something? How does that work? Taunt you?
Well, wouldn't be. Hey, let my wife take care of that end of it.
I was watching randomly the 2008 game last night. I think Week 4, the Steelers won in overtime. Just kind of nostalgia for even just a little more than 10 years ago, just how throwback it felt and how really at the height of that rivalry, how intense it was.
Yeah, no more T-Sizzle now, and
right.
And Mosley's gone, and of course Ray Lewis has been gone, and Eric Weddle's gone, and I don't know about you, I've looked a little bit ahead at that Ravens defense, and as I mentioned at the ahead of the start of the season, there's no way I didn't think that this Ravens defense wouldn't take a step backwards, and they've been a little bit better than what I thought they would be. But boy, when you look at the average yards per play that they've allowed so far this season, now of course you're only 4 weeks in, and a couple of big plays which they've certainly given up can skew those numbers a little bit. But not this. This just isn't the same. Rudolph versus Jackson.
Right.
It kind of sounds like a presidential duel, right?
It's a good segue. I looked up the stat last night. I was going to tweet it out here in a second. Do you know the last time there was a Steelers-Ravens game where neither Ben Roethlisberger nor Joe Flacco started? You want to take a guess when that was?
Was it Tony Smith? Was Tony Smith involved in that one?
Troy Smith, but
Troy Smith?
You're on the right track, yeah. I shouldn't ask you, because you're supposed to say no, I'm supposed to surprise, and now you're just going to get it. No, keep going.
Troy Smith versus Dennis Dixon?
No, not
or
Dennis.
Was it Charlie Batch?
Charlie Batch.
Okay, I knew I was going to be somewhere in that wheel. I knew I had the Smith thing right of it. I just couldn't remember if that was it, because Dennis Dixon did have to start one Monday night game or Sunday night game or something along the lines in there too, I think.
For the bonus round, do you have a year for when that Batch versus Troy Smith matchup happened?
Oh, I'm going to guess 2003.
That's a little too early. 2007, okay. December 30th, okay. 2007, Batch versus Troy Smith. Ravens won 27-21. The last time this rivalry had neither number 7 or Joe Flacco. So yeah, it's been more than 10 years.
Wow.
So it does have a different feel to it.
Certainly does.
And just as a preview a little later in the show, speaking of the Ravens, we're going to have our buddy John Eisenberg talk about the Ravens, Baltimore Ravens columnist, author of The League. You can follow him at @BMoreEisenberg. Again, we'll talk to him a little bit later in the show. For our perspective and our Steelers-centric news, Dave, a little bit of news came in right before we jumped on. Very minor transaction, but that's our kind of thing around here. Steelers released tight end Elise Mack from the practice squad. Probably signaled this group's getting a little bit healthier. Good sign for Vance McDonald, and Mack just a week on the practice squad. That was it.
Yeah, and I don't know how else to take that other than maybe Vance McDonald possibly being a good sign for him. Of course, he missed the game Monday night with that shoulder injury, and that was after Mike Tomlin saying he was optimistic that McDonald would be able to play in that game. Obviously, Mack was added to the practice squad hours, I guess, before they pulled the trigger on trading for Nick Vannett. And, I mean, you still have two other, Kevin Radar and Christian Scotland-Williamson still on the practice squad. So I would think, and we'll see what the injury report says, that there's a good chance maybe Vance McDonald returns after a 1-week absence.
Yeah, that's the indication and clue Tomlin seemed to give, and that's a good time to talk about the injury report. Tomlin, in his Tuesday press conference, said the team basically got out healthy. The injuries that did happen are ones that we saw. Cam Hayward, James Conner, both guys returned to the game. fair to say both are expected to play this Sunday, and Tomlin seemed more optimistic than last week to get guys back like Vance McDonald, like Anthony Chickillo, and like Vince Williams, who himself tweeted that he's off the injury report, so that seems to be a really good sign he's going to be back for Sunday's rivalry. Rosie Nix seems to be less likely to play, still looking at a week-to-week kind of thing, but health-wise, his team trending in the right direction.
Yeah, other than not having your starting quarterback,
Other than that little thing, that's truly, other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln kind of deal.
Yeah, fairly healthy team, other than that. But we shall see what surprises we get on the Wednesday injury report. James Conner was on his radio show last night on 93.7 The Fan, stating that he didn't think that there's anything really going on with that ankle that he injured. He wouldn't say definitely that he'll practice Wednesday. It wouldn't be surprising if both he and Cameron Hayward on a short week are A, either given off, or B, both limited. I bet Hayward has a pretty good welt on his leg, thigh, or what do they call it, quad thigh or whatever that he had injured there from that. But at the end of that, let me tell you, after having your heart sink in your chest a little bit, think, oh man, great, there goes Cameron Hayward off the field. Mm-hmm. The initial report was questionable to return. He came back in the game and he got stronger, I thought, as the game went on. And then James Conner seemed to get stronger when he got back in the game. How much adrenaline had to play in that, we do not know. Just hopeful that both will be able to practice as the week progresses here. And as you stated, no Roosevelt Nix likely again this week. We'll see about Vance McDonald. Vince Williams seems to be thinking that he's going to play this week, and so that would, I guess, leave Anthony Chickillo as probably the biggest unknown quantity right now.
Yeah, we'll get the injury report a little later today, and we'll go from there. But if I had to guess, I'll say McDonald and Vince do play. Chickillo, so up in the air 50-50, and Nix is probably going to sit this one out. So other things Tomlin had at his press conference, obviously asked about the Wildcat, and it honestly was kind of one of the more honest answers. Just knowing Tom, I didn't expect him to kind of admit it in this way, but he did admit that the Wildcat to an extent is gimmicky, and they kind of had to do it because of the injuries that they've had and the circumstance they were in, and kind of a by any means necessary game plan where you had to really come up and be creative. So I appreciated that kind of moment of honesty, even if it isn't the most jaw-dropping news in the world, that he said, we had to do it. We needed that victory, needed to move the ball, and you may not see it every single week. That was kind of a game plan specific type of thing.
Yeah, he said it leveled the playing field. It also limited Mason Rudolph's exposure, quite frankly, to the defense. When you've got a young quarterback, sometimes you can assist them by turning a 70-play game into a 50-play game. You and I attacked the 70 into 50 more from the tight end aspect, I think, while previewing that game. How can we turn it into a 70-play tight end game into a 51? Obviously, we didn't think we would see Wildcat or as much as we did, the 7 snaps. Tomlin went on to say, and sometimes a bunch of exposure is not good exposure. So I thought it was helpful to him to chew up some of those snaps to limit some of his exposure to the defense while putting the ball in the hands of some capable men and being able to produce some plays. And it was good enough to kind of gain some traction, keep us on schedule, and put us in some manageable third downs and things of that nature. He went on to say, I just in regard to what are the things, Mike, what are the things that Mason Rudolph needs to improve on moving forward so that his exposure to defenses are no longer needs to be limited. He just said, I just think continuity with the current pieces that we have are going to assist there. Went on to say that the fact that Nick Vannett is here another week, Zach Gentry has another game under his belt, Deontay Johnson has another game under his belt, and he thinks those are significant components in terms of aiding Mason in the ways of getting him more comfortable. He did go on to add that he acknowledges that the Wildcat is somewhat gimmicky, but at the same time, all of us in the National Football League are prepared for it week in and week out. We just don't get a lot of physical reps when we don't anticipate it. So from that standpoint, because it's on video, he imagines that Baltimore is going to be prepared for it, but he also imagines that Baltimore is going to have a certain level of preparedness for it because of the nature and the functions of their offense, i.e. one Lamar Jackson. and the way he runs and all. So he knows. He went on to say, we did what we had to do to win the game, given the circumstances and the players available. I thought this was kind of an interesting quote from Tomlin. Here he goes, we're just in a fragile state right now. We need to do whatever it is we need to do to move the ball and win football games.
I appreciate the honesty because he's 100% right about that. They needed that win. If they dropped 0-4, the season was totally over, no doubt about it. You're not coming back from 0-4, 0-3 is tough enough. And given the injuries and no Ben and all the circumstances they're dealing with, and the offense struggling so much, if that's what it took, I know it wasn't the prettiest game in the world. It's probably an ugly, convincing win if there is such a thing, but I don't care. I care the offense moved the ball, put up points, and won a game. And so I share and echo Tomlin's sentiment here.
I would, yes, it was exciting to see some Wildcat run. Okay. It was exciting to see the coaching staff actually scheme out a win based on their situation. But you know what would be, and I had this at the end of my post yesterday, Alex, what will really be exciting is when Tomlin and Randy Fichtner feel that there's no longer a need to limit the exposure of Rudolph to opposing defenses. They'll need to start loosening the handcuffs on the young quarterback sooner rather than later, and especially if there's no new way devised to help limit his exposure to opposing defenses. Who knows, Alex? Maybe Tomlin or Randy Fichtner are hard at work right now getting the Veer offense ready for the Ravens.
Gonna run that midline, a wing T perhaps. I agree. And this week's gonna definitely be, ready or not, you're gonna expose Rudolph to this Ravens defense because it is much, much better. It is a lot more complicated, and I don't really expect the team to run much, if any, of this Wildcat stuff because, as Tomlin said, the Ravens know it well. Lamar Jackson basically ran the Wildcat last year, and obviously it's probably stuff that they have in their game plan to some extent for this year. And just now that it's on tape, it's going to be a lot easier to stop. The Ravens are a better team, better front seven, faster linebackers. Kenny Young's going to be able to track down perimeter runs better. So I just don't see it being an effective tool. So you're going to have to probably go back to more a quote-unquote conventional offense to try to beat the Ravens this weekend.
Does it help some that the Steelers ran the Wildcat quite a bit last week in practice against their defense? Does that help the defense much?
Yeah, I'm sure it does, but I'm sure anytime it's Ravens week, they practice those type of things. So I don't know if it's going to give you a whole lot of additional help, but sure, a little bit of extra exposure certainly can hurt.
Mason Rudolph missed some throws again, not pulling the trigger on a few throws again. I'm sure that's going to come. Look, his passing chart looks slightly better than it did the week prior against the San Francisco 49ers. Still not a lot of shots past, let's say, 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, and definitely not past 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. However, he is, the ones that he's throwing, other than the one, of course, down the sideline to Johnny Holton and all, when he is throwing deep, at least getting some results there. It's not much, but the long touchdown to Deontay Johnson was obviously a blown coverage, but that's not Mason's fault. It just feels like, and people are going to say, well, what's your analysis on Mason Rudolph so far? And I can't give one. It's more of an incomplete right now. I can give you an analysis that he's doing check downs fine, and he's reading kind of the shorter intermediate stuff. But heck, you would expect him to complete 17 of 18 short passes or whatever it was right out of the chute when it comes to those kind of things, and especially the ones that are behind the line of scrimmage. We saw some very limited usage of the RPOs again, in this game against the Bengals. But there were 2 or 3 plays, I thought, Alex, that stuck out on tape where he's got to pull the trigger on it, man. This isn't you're no longer in Oklahoma State here. You got to hit those tighter windows. And I'm still optimistic about the kid. I have no reason not to be, but we really can't properly critique or assess Mason until he starts making some of these throws down the field a little bit. And I'm not talking 25, 30 yards down the field. I'm talking between that 7 to 12 yard range.
Yeah, they really haven't. It's really been all or nothing for Rudolph. Either it's line of scrimmage or it's deep downfield, it feels like. You said there were 2 plays. I know it's probably hard to try to describe it in accurate, good detail for the listener, but do you remember any of those 2 plays of where you thought Rudolph had a chance to go deep and didn't take it?
I know the one was the 1st and 20.
What
I
stage
think
of the game was that?
I think that was in the first quarter after the penalty to Holton.
Okay, and he had.
I think he had Juju on the right side coming out of a break.
Okay.
Go back and look at that one. Now it was 1st and 20. You could probably think, man, I don't, just get he is looking that way. Initially, and I think he had a back leaking out underneath, and he ended up just holding the football and then being flushed out to his left, and I think that's one when he hit Vanette over on the sideline for, 9 or 10 yards, and got half of it back there. So, but that was one of the ones that stuck out to me there.
Okay, I've only seen one so far, and it is always tough because you never know what the progression is or what the thought process is, but I got one early third quarter, Juju down the left seam against a single high safety that was on the opposite hash where I felt like Rudolph could have taken a shot. I think he checked it down to, Samuels or Connor. I believe Connor on that play. So I don't know if there's been a ton of missed chances. I just think he's been clean, efficient, making a profit on each throw, and he's still got 3 touchdowns of 35-plus yards in his first 2 starts. I mean, I get what you're saying, and they're going to have to be able to move the ball more intermediate stuff. But, just for a young quarterback settling in, I'm not too mad about it, to be honest.
Right, and like I said, I didn't see a lot of them, but it was just a couple, and the one that I just don't remember the timestamp on it. It might be the one that you referenced being the second one, but go back and
I'm at 12:01 in the third quarter, if that's yours.
All right. No, that's not. I don't remember. I didn't mark down the timestamp on it there. I should have. Okay. But I know the first one because I looked at it long last night. And I was waiting for TweetDeck to come back up so I could post a GIF of it, but that never happened there. But I did post a still shot of it if you want to look at that.
Is that on your timeline?
Yeah, it's on my timeline from late last night, early this morning. There, and I got a nice little line of sight, and Juju's just coming out of that break. In fact, I probably could have froze it half a second, earlier there, because if he lets that thing rip as Juju's coming out of his break, and because of the zone defender's arm, one of them's moving to the underneath to the running back there. It was there as far as I could tell.
Okay. I think I just. Yeah. Yeah.
You'll have to see it in motion.
It's a lot easier.
And that, like I said, that's a steal shot. But if you go back and you can't, there's not a good look at it from really the end zone view of Juju coming out. But it looks like his line of sight's fine. It looks like he's about ready to pull the trigger on it, but just didn't.
Yeah, I'm not. If he hits the back here, right? And is this the play? You said he hits the back in the check down?
No. He rolled. He ended up being flushed out to his left.
Right.
He didn't even take the profit up underneath.
Right. I think this is when he pulled it down. Okay, I got you. Yeah, I can understand the thought process. They're not trying to make.
It was 1st and 20.
Yeah. Deontay Johnson had actually been wide open on that play as it scrambled and extended out, but
right. I mean, there's maybe a hole shot there too.
Yeah, initially, but I'm talking about whenever Rudolph rolled to his left, Johnson and breaking across the field was super wide open, but scrambles, sometimes you miss that stuff. But anyway, point taken. I mean, he's going to have to be able to test the arm downfield and make a tight window throw. You can't run the Wildcat to victory the rest of the season. That's just not going to happen.
Right. I'm not on you. I'm just kind of piggybacking on to a few of the things from the week before that. I mean, it's not like it's littered with, oh my God, why didn't he make that throw right there? It's just a few and far between ones. He's yet to do it, and until he does, it's going to be hard to kind of critique him on that. I will say this. Now, there were 5 passes on third downs this past week. Now, obviously, they had more third downs other than that, but they chose. And what's aggravating when you go back through it is the 5 plays on 4 on third down and 1 on fourth down where they were short yardage situations where they ran and didn't get a damn one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But he had 5 others that he threw on third down. And all 5 of those, or 4 of those 5, he threw at the chains and beyond. You know how mad I get when quarterbacks don't throw for chains on third downs. But these were very manageable situations. 4 of them he did throw at the chains. 2 of those 4 were completed. And the one that he threw underneath happened in the fourth quarter, about midway, was the dump off to Jalen Samuels, and then that one ended up being a first down. there. Jalen Samuels got some yak after that play there. So, 3 of the 5 or 4 of the 5, like I said, he threw for the chains, and 3 of the 5 ended up converting. So, he is at least in those short area third down. He did convert with his arm, and he did throw for the chains in those situations.
And I thought he was good with his reads, and he went through his progressions, and he found the open guys. Sometimes that meant taking the check down or just hitting the Bengals played a lot of soft zone coverage and really let them throw underneath. And so I'm not particularly upset for Rudolph playing the short game because that's really what the defense was telling the Steelers to do. They were playing these soft zones and cover two and kind of keeping things in front. And while there were a couple shots, as you pointed out, and as I pointed out, to go downfield, I thought by and large throughout the game, the Bengals just let the Steelers stink and dunk. And I thought Rudolph just made the smart play, and I don't think I don't know if he made a mistake all night. I'm trying to think if he made one terrible, risky throw, and I don't think that happened. And that's a good improvement, and I'll take that from a young quarterback making his second career start.
And that throw to Vanette too, the kind of extended play. That was it was underthrown. Yeah, it was off the back foot and all, but he threw that where only his guy was going to catch the ball.
Right.
And he threw it with the defender having his back to him, so the defender did not see it, had no chance to play on the ball. And Vanette did what you would expect a good tight end to do, and that's bail catch a ball that was slightly underthrown. So that play needs to be circled as a very positive one for Rudolph.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Vanette, he said it was he tweeted out after the game the most fun he's had in football in I don't know how long. So maybe that's a little bit of lip service, but seems to like it here in Pittsburgh. Hopefully he'll re-sign.
Look, I mean, we'll see against this Baltimore defense, because if they're smart, they're going to make him throw the football down the field here. And I guess one other positive, and this isn't nobody was higher on Mason Rudolph coming out than maybe I was here after watching a lot of his tape, though. But until I start seeing him make some of these NFL throws, the jury's still out on him. They are babying him. It was a very managed game for him and for the coaching staff this past week. Now let's see if they can take kind of the next step forward with him.
And the Ravens are obviously a much tougher defense in terms of personnel and talent, but just in terms of coverage and disguise and confusing quarterbacks. Yeah. I mean, they throw every trick in the book, even with a lot of new faces. So that's going to be the big challenge. The Bengals are pretty simple, pretty vanilla. You kind of know what you're getting. Baltimore is, roll the dice. You don't know what coverage you're getting. They'll have safeties down near the line of scrimmage and end up playing the deep middle. I mean, they've played Patrick Mahomes, so they've known how to vary coverages to try to slow down Patrick Mahomes. I mean, they certainly will have a plan to how to slow down Mason Rudolph.
And once again, when Mason is going deep, heck, I think it's been how many throws? 10 throws over that are considered deep throws of over. There might be one more in there if you really count the one in the end zone to Juju. That why don't they add end zone? One of the things that bothers me, I guess first world problems here that Dave's having, is they don't count end zone yardage on throws. So in other words, if you throw in, if you're at the 13-yard line and you throw a ball into the end zone, it's not considered a deep pass. It's just considered a 13-yard throw.
Yeah. Well, I guess just because they're not considered yards, because it's not a yard line. It's just, I don't know. I get what your point, though.
But, I guess if you add that one in, he's right around 40% in deep pass situations, which, on a yearly basis, if a quarterback's giving you a 40% or better completion percentage on throws more than 15 yards past the line of scrimmage, I'm signing up for it.
Yeah, that's a great number. All right, Dave, we're going to talk to John Eisenberg here again. Follow him at @BMoreEisenberg. He'll tell you everything we need to know about Ravens week. So we'll be right back with John Eisenberg.
Okay, welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. It is Wednesday. It is a short week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That means our next guest has an unfair advantage over us, but he usually does anyway. He's been on he has to be one of the longest running guests. We probably owe him a year's supply of rice-a-roni, the San Francisco treat, or a gold watch or something along those lines. I am, of course, talking about the great John Eisenberg, columnist for the Baltimore Ravens. John also is an esteemed author, several books that you can find on Amazon, and it's already October. That means you should be looking forward to some Christmas gifts, and if there's a football fan or a sports fan on your Christmas list, his latest book, The League, by the way, How 5 Rivals Created the NFL and Launched a Sports Empire, is absolutely fantastic. That would be the best stocking stuffer you can give this year. John, how did I do there? Happy Wednesday, and welcome back to the Terrible Podcast.
Well, thank you for those kind words. You did wonderfully. And so I'm just double checking. My choice is some rice-a-roni or a watch.
Yeah, but probably not a 14-karat gold watch.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No, okay. As always, you know what we think about you, and our favorite, as many times as you've been on over the years, and it is Ravens week, John, and I'm not sure that a couple years ago you had envisioned a Lamar Jackson versus Mason Rudolph first meeting of the Steelers and the Ravens in 2019. But here we are. That's what's on tap for Week 5 of the NFL. Obviously, the game is in Pittsburgh this time around. The Ravens are coming off of 2 losses to the Chiefs and the Cleveland Browns after wins against the Miami Dolphins and Arizona Cardinals. John, let me open it up this way with you. We talked to you before the season got started and all, got the preview of the Ravens and all. The Ravens at 2-2, and what you've witnessed so far through the first 4 weeks of the season, is this team what you expected? Where are the Ravens right now in terms of what maybe you thought they would be?
Well, I mean, they are definitely at a sort of an important part, point of their season, a turning point of some kind. It's a question of where it's going to be turning. My instinct going in was I thought this was going to be a decent football team, playoff caliber team. They're defending champions in the division. Lamar Jackson, I was pretty high on him, and I continue to be high on him. I mean, he's a playmaker, and he might be the number 1 playmaker in the division now. And it definitely gives the Ravens hope in any game they play in. But he is still a young quarterback. This is his first game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. What does that tell you? I mean, this is a guy that we are in the midst of the education of Lamar Jackson here still, by all means. And a young guy still learning how to get by in the NFL. But the real issue for the Ravens and what's going on, of course, is that defense, which, Pittsburgh Steelers fans know better than anybody that year in and year out the Ravens have played great defense. And this year they simply are not. The Cleveland Browns tore them up last week. The Kansas City Chiefs tore them up the week before. Over 500 yards of offense against Baltimore for the first time in back-to-back games in franchise history. So something bad is going on that side of the ball. And so that's where all the drama is right now. With the Ravens, I mean, they're making personnel moves. They're trying to figure it out on that side of the ball before this season slips away.
When you look back at the last 2 games, Jackson got off to a hot start in those first 2 games, but you have to I think now you have to look back and quantify those against the Dolphins and against the Cardinals, the 2 teams that he played against, and then you fast forward to these last 2 games against the Chiefs and the Browns. One thing I noticed at the end of that game, and maybe you picked up on this, maybe this just is who Lamar Jackson is. I didn't like his body language on the sideline there, or after the game started to get out of hand there with Lamar Jackson. Did you pick up any on that on kind of poor body language and on the sideline there?
Just in terms of, you mean sort of looking like, oh, this is bad, I'm mad, or is that what you're talking about? Or,
yeah,
or
just
the body language being sulking?
Yeah, kind of all of it, really. It didn't look like a leader, the quarterback on the sideline there.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't really pick up on that. I'll ask some people about that. The Ravens, they're not too worried about him as a leader. I mean, as I said before, I mean, if that was an issue, I guarantee you they'll talk to him about it. because, as I said, he's 22, or as John Harbaugh said before the season started, he's 22 all the time. So he is a very young guy, and this is his 13th or 14th start will be in the NFL, and so he is definitely still learning his way on things like that. And that game was the first game where, other than the playoff loss to the Chargers, where he, it was a bad scene for the home team. So he's dealing with that really for the first time. And so we'll see. I mean, they're not too worried about him as a leader. And as a matter of fact, he's been pretty good with comebacks in terms of when he's behind, like the playoff game last year against the Chargers. They were down. They almost came back at the end. The Kansas City game, they were behind in the fourth quarter, made it a one-score game at the end. They're pretty happy about how he handles the fourth quarter losing games. So that's an interesting thing that you point out, and I'll look into that. But I'm sure the Ravens, if it is an issue, they'll use it as a teachable moment.
Now I do tend to wear my tinfoil hat and have that chin strap tightened up a little bit too tight at times, so maybe I'm reading too much into it. But I tell you, overall his stats are not bad, and we've seen him make some great throws in those first two games there. I think you would agree, though, he got away with a few throws in that game against the Chiefs, though.
Oh, without a doubt, those were Hail Marys that he threw up there. And, it's been overall, I think you'll see his passing is significantly improved from last year. He still has wobbly moments. I mean, he's never going to throw a beautiful, clean ball like Joe Flacco, just a picture-perfect ball. He's just not going to be that kind of passer. But he is improved. He spent the offseason working on his mechanics. His stance is wider. His feet are wider. He's more in balance, following through. There's just all sorts of stuff that they're happy with. It slipped a little bit this past week. He threw some in the ground like he was doing last year. And so, back to the drawing board, and they have to work with him on that. But in the meantime, I mean, he continues to move the chains. The Ravens have had no problems moving the chains this year. This game against Cleveland, they really hurt themselves on offense. They moved the ball quite a bit, a couple 3-and-outs, not that many, but it was a Mark Ingram fumble. It was Lamar underthrowing a ball to Hollywood Brown. It was Mark Andrews dropping a deep ball right in his hands over the middle. Chris Moore standing out of bounds when he's wide open, catches a pass. Lots of stuff like that is what set that offense back against Cleveland. Self-inflicted wounds, not systemic stuff so much as just episodes of bad judgment and bad play. And obviously you need to just minimize that as much as you can, but they can move the ball. And I expect them to move the ball in most games, because at half the time when it's 3rd and 6, Lamar just takes off running, and he is very hard to stop in that situation. I mean, you can't do it forever, but he's still very effective doing that, and it does move the chains.
John, one guy that has moved the chains consistently this year is Mark Ingram, and that fumble aside last week, he's averaging over, 6 yards a carry. What makes him such a good scheme fit and good kind of mesh with this offense?
Well, it's definitely a power running game and downhill running game, much like last year. And Ingram has, I'd say, exceeded expectations. Yes, that fumble was bad. That's the first negative thing of any kind he has done. He has, as a matter of fact, at 12 carries last week, from my mind, that's not enough. I think they need to have the ball in his hands and get back a little bit more to the real running first offense that they were doing last year. Was very effective. And Ingram is a great guy to be leading that. I mean, there's all sorts of advanced analytics on how much yardage he gains after contact. He's just a tough runner. It's a perfect stylistic fit for the Ravens. He takes a hit, he keeps going. He's like a bowling ball, a little bigger than that, but very square, low to the ground, strong legs, and he just keeps going. And the Ravens are thrilled with him. I mean, he has definitely added a dimension to the offense. He can also, and he's a good blocker, and he can catch the ball. So he's very well rounded.
But, of course, a good running game is nothing without a good offensive line, and I'm sure Steeler fans will be mad at me for saying this, but I think the Ravens have one of the more underrated lines in football, especially at tackle with Ronnie Stanley and Orlando Brown. How have those two guys really come along, especially Brown on that right side? Because I'll admit, when they drafted him, I thought that was a colossal miss because of the poor combine workout that he had, but he's been awesome ever since he started, midway through last year. So how have those guys really improved and progressed through their careers?
Good. I mean, Ryan Stanley, the metrics on him are really high. I think I saw something as a Pro Football Focus has him the highest rated pass blocking tackle.
Wow.
In the league. So Stanley is definitely very solid there on the left side. Orlando Brown, really from the moment he stepped on the field, the bad combine. I mean, a lot of people were down on him, and certainly the Ravens swung and missed on some draft picks in the third round. They just cut Tim Williams. Was a third-round pick, so they don't always hit. But I think they hit on Orlando Brown, just missing that combine performance. And he's been really good. He's big. He's just what you want in a right tackle. He moves well. Where they do, running game, the blocking has been fine. Pass protection a little bit. They can be vulnerable up the middle. Left guard, Bradley Bozeman, the center, Matt Skura. There have been some issues with pass protection coming through the interior. If anything, that's where that line is vulnerable.
Couple early round draft picks, obviously, and Marquise Brown at wide receiver and Miles Boykin, a guy Alex and I both thought, and the Steelers did show interest in. We thought he very well could have been, Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver. Brown got off to a hot start there, kind of cooled off, I think, the last few weeks here. Boykin seems to be week by week, growing into what his role will be in that offense. What have been your overall thoughts on those two, and especially the last 2 weeks?
That's pretty. What's happened the last 2 weeks? Teams are definitely playing the Ravens a certain way, and that's with the double high safeties. I mean, they're taking away the deep ball to Hollywood Brown. That after what happened in the first 2 weeks, he certainly just tore up Miami, as you said. Not that I don't know how much weight that carries.
I don't know. He blew by Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Well, he did. You're right. He absolutely did, and I think the rest of the league saw that. And he also caught a deep ball against Arizona to clinch that game. I mean, he's very dangerous. He is a danger. He's fast. They're happy with Brown overall. They've had a lot of trouble drafting wide receivers over the years that have been good. The Brashad Perryman effect. Brown, they're very happy with. He's fast. He has great hands. He catches almost any. He dropped one this week, was the first one. Catches most things around him, and he runs good routes. The problem is opponents are taking him away. I think Steelers may do the same thing this week. So they have to figure that out. They need Boykin and the other receivers have to become better, more substantial targets that can shift that coverage. So, Boykin's going into it a little bit. They are starting 2 rookie wide receivers. The Ravens are just rolling with that this year. Young quarterback, rookie wide receivers, new offense. I mean, that is where they are on that side of the ball. Sort of a reboot and a different style of offense, and it's very interesting to watch. And gone are the days of the old, the Joe Flacco drop back and all that. I mean, it is a different world on this side of the ball. And, with other teams taking away that deep ball, the Ravens are having to adjust. So the chess match is on. It is underway, and I'm sure I'm interested to see how they address it this week.
Flipping over to the other side of the football, the Ravens defense, the one thing that we marveled in the last couple of years is, man, this team not only has talent on side of football, but nobody disguised coverages pre-snap like Weddle and a couple of those guys over there. Weddle's obviously no longer there. In comes Earl Thomas. Jimmy Smith's been banged up. Marlon Humphrey, I think, is playing great. No issues there. But obviously Mosley's gone from that unit. I think Brandon Williams is banged up right now. Earl Thomas, I think, is mad at Brandon for being banged up. What, Hey, give me what's the status on Jimmy Smith and Brandon Williams this week? And this is a Ravens defense that enters, and you hit on this at the opening in here, giving up a lot of yards, and I think they're last in the NFL in average yards per play. Now they have been busted for some big plays, and with a 4-week sample size, kind of hard to read too much into that statistic. But you can't cherry pick those things. They are what they are. So with that, what's the status on Williams and Jimmy Smith and the overall health of this team right now? What have you seen out of this defense that's causing these problems?
Well, the injuries definitely are not helping. I mean, Jimmy Smith is still a good cover corner, and he's been out since the early part of week 1. I'd be surprised if he's back this week. I don't see that happening. He hasn't been practicing. I guess he could hit the practice field. I don't see it happening. Brandon Williams, he was a late addition to the injury list last week, didn't miss the game. And the Ravens are being sort of vague about it. I don't know what's going on there. They really need him because for years, certainly the Ravens, their defense has operated. It's the old Rex Ryan theory. You begin with the first commandment is thou shalt stop the run. And they're not even doing that. And Brandon's a big part of that. So they really need him back. So I mean, and they've not been happy. They really miss Mosley. I mean, they lost the three guys they missed, one at each level, Suggs, Mosley, and Weddle. They parted ways with Weddle. They basically cut him.
Yeah, I didn't understand that. I still think he's one of the better, defensive minds. But continue on.
Well, the mind was not the problem. They were very happy with that, and I'm not sure, it remains to be seen whether they got that right. But I think they are missing his organizational abilities. He certainly physically had slowed down, wasn't making a lot of plays was the issue that the Ravens had. So they bring in Earl Thomas. Earl, has intercepted a ball the first week of the season, has not had a play since then. He has made a lot of tackles. He's played a different defense in Seattle. He is still getting used to sort of the double. He was more of a free safety, just roam center field type guy in Seattle. He has more assignments here. And so, you're into the weeds of defensive football, X's and O's. It is having an impact, as he will admit. But, he made a bunch of tackles last week, and he's around the ball and a good football player. But, he's not the organizational guy that Weddle is. They may be missing that. And, they really are missing Mosley. Mosley's an elite player. I mean, 4 Pro Bowls in 5 years, tackling machine. The fans would get on him because his pass coverage, he's big. And so his pass coverage was not always perfect, and teams could take advantage of that. But the replacements are not as big, and they're getting pushed around inside there. And Suggs too. Suggs at this point in his career, I mean, he's actually having a real nice season in Arizona. But where they really miss him, they miss everything he brings this year. They're just not getting a sustained pass rush. What they're really missing, though, is his ability to set the edge. He's still a big, physical, tough edge setter, and they're just not getting that on the right side of the defense.
I know you said the defense has struggled, but I've always been impressed, like Dave mentioned, about how kind of exotic and chaotic and all the different looks and how multiple this defense can be. How are they able to do that with all the new faces and new pieces? And is that maybe causing some of the issues for why they're struggling, because there is so much going on with this coached-up defense?
I don't know that. I mean, they got a lot of issues. I don't know if that's the one. I mean, that's Wink Martindale. I'm a fan of him as a defensive coordinator. He's able to sort of invent pressure, and it's fun to watch, and it's effective. But I think you have to have what we're learning to some degree, you have to have some personnel. I mean, the defense, if they just are not afraid of these guys, I mean, they're not winning the one-on-one the 4-man rush is getting nowhere. And so you just have to dial some stuff up, and that leaves you more vulnerable on the back end. They're just getting torn up in the middle of the field with tight ends and running backs against the inside linebackers. So they're paying a price for it. And, if you bring some pressure, there's a hole, and the coverage is not there. So it's very, very much of a challenge for Martindale to sort of figure out, all right, how can I balance this? How am I keep sending these guys
Right.
And we're getting hit for it. So certainly Kansas City, Pat Mahomes just did it all day. Now that's to be expected. I mean, he's great, and there's only so much you can do. Baker Mayfield had a big game as well. So, they're trying to figure out how to calibrate all that stuff, because they do have those plays and it's effective. But, when you dial something up and you get hit for it, you're hesitant to do it again.
Absolutely. I think I asked you a while back, John, with all the new pieces, who are going to be the leaders of this defense? Because no Suggs, no Mosley, some of the, no Eric Weddle. Right now, the answer to that might not be anyone based on how they're playing. But you tell me, is anyone stepping up into that leadership role right now?
I think it's an issue. Earl Thomas is certainly the most accomplished guy there. Mm-hmm. Just a great football player. He's coming off a broken leg this year, and you can just see, so he makes so many plays. When you really study the tape on him, he's great, but he is not a vocal leader type. And so he's still adjusting to a new locker room. And so he is not the guy. Brandon Williams, to some degree, is a leader, but he's kind of an amiable, nice guy, not a particularly driven personality. Mm-hmm. So they're looking for. Matt Judon has some instincts there, but he doesn't seem to be taking over that role. So I think trying to figure that out, to be very honest with you.
I'm not sure. I haven't seen if Harbaugh's talked yesterday or not. I think he talks today as well, too. Has he been asked, or will he be asked? I'll be interested to hear his thoughts on Mason Rudolph. Obviously, the Ravens, I think, jumped back up into the bottom of that round in the 2018 draft to draft Jackson there. I just wonder, and I don't remember if Harbaugh or how much presence they had at that Oklahoma State pro day there, but does he have you heard any early thoughts from him on Mason Rudolph? And if not, I would be interested to see if he gets asked that today.
Oh, he definitely will be asked that. He has not given his thoughts yet. That will happen in today's press conference. And I'm sure he'll be positive. The tape that he's seen, what's there to say? I think he'll be pretty positive about him. Mason, I haven't seen every down, but certainly, was very effective in the Monday night game, and the San Francisco game. Some ups and some downs. Certainly a little bit like Lamar. You're looking at the education of Mason here. This is what this is. He's learning his way through the NFL, and so you're going to have everything's not going to be peachy. So, but I think generally speaking, the Ravens are going to be pretty clear that they feel like, the Steelers, that may have been their first win on Monday night, but they know how to play winning football, and they're going to scheme up some stuff that's pretty interesting, pretty challenging. So I think they're looking at this as a tough game.
Defensively this week, are you expecting Marlon Humphrey to maybe try to travel around with Juju? Juju spends a lot of time in the slot and some in that bunch formation and all. Do you think Marlon will travel, or do you think is he going to stay on primarily on one side?
I think he'll probably travel. They have not always done that. When you have Jimmy Smith on the other side, right. That gives you a lot more latitude there, but they're definitely into their depth because of injuries in the secondary. So Marlon is the clear winner there, and he is his man coverage is really strong. He is really emerging. So I think if they ascertain that Juju is really the guy that can hurt them, they will put Marlon on him and count on the rest of the guys filling in.
There's no sense to asking you about the special teams because Justin Tucker and Sam, them guys ever going to retire? I guess that we won't ask you any questions about special teams until one of those two guys go, because those guys are just simply the best in the business. So we'll bypass the special teams portion of this discussion for the time being. So with that, I know it's a little bit earlier in the week though, but you're usually good about giving us an early prediction here on thoughts of what's going to go down. I think the Ravens are hovering hovering around a 3.5 point road favorite here as Wednesday starts here. What are your thoughts on this game, John? Are the Ravens going to take this one on the road? How about a final score prediction here?
I do think the Ravens will take it on the road. One thing I've learned following this team this year is, don't expect any normal scores. I mean, John Harbaugh is going for two left and right, and it's been a big issue here with analytics. So, a score like 26-25. I'll go 26-25, Baltimore Ravens.
Wow, that would sound like possible heartbreaker there for sure. All right, before we get out of here, tell people who might be new to the podcast. Tell them a little bit about the league.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, I wrote a book. Came out last year. It's on the five owners who. It's the early days of the NFL, basically a creation story and how it was really a failing enterprise for many years. And who were the owners? Who were the guys that kept the NFL going and set it up to succeed later? And I've identified five guys, and Art Rooney Sr. is one of them. There's tons of Pittsburgh stuff in this book, sort of not just about what he did in the early days of the franchise there. Of course, they weren't very good for many years, but what he did in sort of in the larger framework of the league and what impact he had as one of the founders, basically, of the modern NFL. And it's about those guys. The other ones, Tim Mara, Burt Bell, George Halas, George Preston Marshall. What did these guys do as they were best friends? They were rivals. What was the relationship there? How did they keep this league going? And I've heard from a lot of people in Pittsburgh who have enjoyed it, so I hope that continues. It's just out in paperback, too. It just came out in paperback, so it's another way to get it. All
right. Well, John, we're probably not going to talk again until week 17 of the season. Hopefully we have, hopefully the Steelers, that'll be a meaningful game. But it all starts this week, week 5 at Heinz Field against the Baltimore Ravens. As usual, John, we appreciate you being on. Make sure you read John's work at BaltimoreRavens.com, and make sure you following him on Twitter at @BMoreEisenberg. John, until week 17. As usual, thanks for being on the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.
Thanks, John.
As always, a great time. Thank you.
And again, our thanks to John Eisenberg, always, I think, one of our favorite guests to bring on. You can follow him at @BMoreEisenberg on Twitter, and buy The League, now out on paperback. And it's a book I know I keep having to tell myself I need to get. I know it's going to be a great read. But again, thanks again to John Eisenberg. And if you're listening, Steelization, give him a shout on Twitter or however you can find him, and buy the book The League if you can. I'm sure it's a great buy.
Boy, can you imagine if his prediction comes true and the Steelers lose by 1?
I like the wacky score thing, though, because I should have asked him that because, like he said, Harbaugh's really pushed the analytics and the two-point conversions and the unconventional stuff. So I think this game's going to have a awkward number, potential scoregami kind of thing.
We're going to have an 8 in here, aren't we?
Yeah, you're going to have an 8 or a 9, something funky.
All right, we'll as we dive into the tape a little bit more, we're still short weeks are hard on us. Can you imagine how hard it is on a team like the Steelers this week?
Yeah, to go AFC North back-to-back and then Baltimore being the second of that on the short week, not going to be easy. But, hey, that's the challenge. No excuses. Tomlin won't make them. And speaking of that, to go back to Tomlin's press conference, he talked about the boomerang coming back around for Dante Moncrief. Player that was active last week against the Bengals, played 3 snaps, did not see a target. So I guess, Tomlin said, you never know when you have to rely on these guys. So if the boomerang does come back around to Moncrief, you better catch it.
You beat me to it, didn't you?
I knew you were going to go for that.
Yeah. Hopefully he doesn't drop it, Yeah. Here's the thing. We talked about the LJ Fort thing and the compensatory pick, but, man, I understand the thought process of a lot of people listening to this podcast saying, man, are you telling me that he wasn't the transaction today, of him getting cut and all? He did dress, obviously, this game last week. I don't know how much that was related to the healthy bodies and all like that. I think that played a part in that. I mean, if he's back, if McDonald's back this week, I mean, who do you sit down this week? I mean, you would think Moncrief's in the early lead to be sat back down, and that kind of I don't know if that necessarily goes against what Mike Tomlin said, on Tuesday about the boomerang. Just he wants them to be ready when it does come back around. Doesn't mean it'll be this week, but man, Ryan Switzer has not played a snap in the last 2 games. Moncrief's played 3 or 4 snaps in the last 2 games. Obviously was inactive one of them. I mean, the only way this boomerang, I think, comes back around for Dante Moncrief is if unfortunately if an injury happens. We obviously don't want anything like that to happen. The only other thing I can figure is they're either watching some of these other practice squads around the league or any transactions here, but you would think it would, to try to get a wide receiver off the street, kind of a veteran guy to come in and catch this moving train that can play, the X and the Z and, maybe even sometimes in the slot. They're going to be kind of hard to find unless that player's not Eli Rogers, and it doesn't look like they're too concerned about Eli Rogers at this point, unless maybe a guy in the practice squad like Tevin Jones. Yes, they do have until week 10 to part ways with Dante Moncrief, but every time you roll him out there and dress him, you also run run risk of him getting injured, and then you having to keep him on IR,
Mm-hmm.
So what does the boomerang coming back around mean for Dante Moncrief?
I don't know if anyone knows what it means right now. I just think it's Tomlin saying that because of an injury could happen or poor play or whatever it is, sometimes these things, guys get second chances over the course of a season. So I haven't done the math of who would be inactive. We'll see what the injury report says, but my guess is that if you get guys back like Vince Williams, like Vance McDonald, potentially like Anthony Chickillo, then yeah, Moncrief's probably going to be an odd man out just from a numbers crunch standpoint, but it may not be talking this week. It may be something where 3 weeks from now Moncrief gets a hat again or gets to play because of an injury or whatever the case may be. Game plan circumstance, who knows? So I think that's Tomlin just always keeping the light on because you never know when you're going to need that guy later on in the season.
You go from the optimism. Look, I mean, nobody expected. I always thought they were a little bit too bullish on Moncrief at the head of the start of the season, but on the flip side, I didn't think Deontay Johnson would have to be this involved in the offense early on. I mean, he's in it now. You're not pulling him out of there now, especially the plays that he's making. So good on him. He's getting separation. That's good. All these wide receivers, according to the analytics, are having some separation there, so that's good. But man, you are an injury away now from Switzer, Holton, or Moncrief playing a considerable amount of snaps. And at the start of the season, that might not have sounded like that big of a deal, but 4 weeks into the season, man, that's something you just don't want to see now.
It's got a Kobe Hamilton kind of feel when they were back relying on him several years ago.
Right, I mean, and Dante, look, if Dante can get over, and that's a big if right now, if he can get himself back on track, but I mean, like we said, when is that chance going to come? Only something bad can happen now, I think, for that boomerang to go back at him at this point.
Yeah, probably. But I think, again, you take it week to week in terms of the decision to cut him. As we talked about yesterday's podcast, you're waiting probably as long as you can wait week 9, week 10 before making a decision there. But as I said, if he's not more involved, if this team isn't in the thick of a playoff race, then you're dumping Moncrief. I mean, you just have to make that cold, calculated decision because you're probably not keeping him through the offseason, even if you are. Really, what's his value to this team? And correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, not only do they lose out on a third-round pick, if they don't cut Moncrief, they don't get any compensatory pick for Bell, right? It just cancels out. Am I correct on that?
That's my understanding. Is that just goes completely by the wayside?
Right.
There.
So we're not talking about third versus a fourth. We're talking about a third versus nothing for Bell, which I'm sure one reason why the Steelers have been so aggressive in their trades is because they at least thought they were going to get the comp pick for Bell. And that's one reason why they've been so aggressive, why they barely have any draft picks right now, especially on day one. They have one day one draft pick right now. So I think that was part of the calculation. You got to get that pick back, and that's got to mean cutting Moncrief should the circumstances be the same when we're talking week 9.
I mean, you're obviously still playing to be in this thing and win it all. That's in your head. I mean, obviously the trades and all indicate that as well too. And I mean, that's
why I'm not making a move now.
Right. I'm not either, unless a much better option comes along. But I mean, what's the likelihood of that? At this point here, I mean, once again, they don't seem to have any interest in Eli Rogers unless it's a break glass in case of emergency later on in the season. But if you get later on in the season anyway and you're out of it and you are dumping Moncrief, you're bringing up Tevin Jones or something like that to get an extended look at him.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Unless someone like a Deontay Spencer somehow becomes available again, I'm not sure what he's done in Denver.
How much does he even help other than the return game? You know?
Well, yeah, that's kind of the way I was thinking it. But clearly, this team is searching for anyone to make a splash in the return game. They're rotating 3 guys in kicks and punts with Holton, Switzer, and Deontay Johnson. So I think they're just waiting for someone to wake up and claim that job. And if someone else comes available, I'm just spitballing. Obviously, I'm not really banking on that happening. He's still a Denver Bronco right now anyway. But I'm just saying is that the back end of the receiver situation and the roles are pretty fluid.
Are you surprised Ryan Switzer played 0 snaps in the last 2 games?
No, just because what was he offering you? Nothing. Now, again, part of that is because of the route tree they're asking him to run. They're not really asking him to run downfield, and that's why his receptions are so poor. But this team needs more of a vertical explosive element. But who knows? With the way they're naked and nunk, and maybe Switzer in some small way could have a value to that to be underneath threat or underneath option, I should say, for Rudolph.
Yeah, you're definitely not throwing to him 5 times though. Hopefully, if you do get Switzer involved in any way.
Yeah, but Holton too. They've been trying to go the deep ball with Holton, and it's not all his fault, but they're 0 for 4 in the deep ball for Holton this year. They're just not really getting any plays outside of Deontay Johnson stepping up a little bit, and then Juju obviously being there. Outside of that, it's been pulling teeth.
All right, what else? What else do we have here from Tomlin that caught your eye?
That was about it for me. Talked about Benny Snell being impressive on special teams. He's on the kick coverage team, especially taking on a bigger role with Rosie Nix out. I think Snell played 17 special team snaps against the Bengals, which I believe tied for the team lead. So I think him putting his hand in the pile kind of stuff has been impressive because, as I said, this is all kind of uncharted territory for Snell, who was the man everywhere he's been and, stepped into a dominant lead role at Kentucky his freshman season. So I think he's kind of embraced that well, and I think he's done a nice job.
He also had some positives. Tomlin did comments about Steven Nelson catching up with the defense. He said he's doing great. I like his attention to detail. I like his professionalism. From time to time, we put him in awkward circumstances because of the nature of how we play. I just like everything he's doing thus far. I look forward to him contributing or continuing to be a positive aspect of our play. And look, this is a guy in Steven Nelson that was was the highest targeted cornerback in the NFL last year with the Chiefs, and not so much to start things off this year. You have to think that it'd be interesting to see how if the Ravens try to attack him, on the outside with maybe a guy like Boykin this coming week.
Yeah, well, Nelson's played pretty shutdown defense. Even that pass interference that was called, I thought was pretty questionable against the Bengals. But I wonder how well Bradley Roby's doing in Houston. I'm just trying to search that now because remember they offered Roby before they offered Nelson, and it sounds like Roby's doing okay too. So I guess just the Steelers had a couple good choices out there.
All right, if that's it with us kind of covering what Tomlin had to say, what you and I both had a chance to start scouring the tape from the game against the Bengals. It's a lot more enjoyable this week. We are already hit on. I don't know what there's to add much about the Wildcat, right? Other than they left some. The running game left the plays on the field that we already discussed, mostly on the third down situations, and then the traditional runs on the early downs that they just are not able to run up the middle here against some of these stacked boxes, and they're going to have to start figuring that out because, like we said, we don't expect a lot of Wildcat, if any, this week against the Ravens. So what stuck out other than maybe the Wildcat and the lack of pushing the ball down the field offensively for the Steelers?
Well, I thought overall for the offensive line, just to kind of wrap a bow on that one, just the movement that they got at the line of scrimmage, how well they won. The line of scrimmage was a complete 180 from the 49ers game. Granted, you are facing a weaker Bengals front than you are the 49ers, but just to Castro, Pouncey, Foster, Villanueva, Filer, thought they did a great job just winning the battle up front and creating that push. The other thing I would point to, and I know this is going to be a little flowery, a little cliche, and take it for whatever it's worth. I just love the body language of this team, top to bottom, and how everyone roots for each other, and it's big plays, it's small plays. Everybody kind of, is coming together as a team, whether that's Mason Rudolph, you saw the way the offensive line mobbed him after the touchdown to Deontay Johnson, the way that Bud Dupree and Vince Williams, who wasn't even dressed, were going crazy for Ulysses Goodwin III after making a tackle on a kick return. The way that Joe Hayden's jumping around after T.J. Watt gets a sack. The way that Mason Rudolph is pumping his fist on Jalen Samuels' 2-yard touchdown, even though Rudolph's on the far side in that Wildcat formation. Just kind of everybody rooting for each other, that whole team element. And I really say that because, when you're, at the time you were 0-3, when you're 1-3, you're going through some tough times. You're trying to search for a win, and you're trying to get through this tough part of the season. And to do that, you got to be a team. You got to come together. You have to really have that all or nothing, us against the world mentality. And I think this team has that. I think they show that in the way that they kind of play for each other. I know that's a minor thing that doesn't always really help you win more games, but I think it helps you rally around each other, try to dig yourself out of this hole. And I think everyone is really kind of putting their hand in the pile and rooting for each other to succeed as a team.
Are you trying to say the cheerleader coach has a bunch of cheerleaders?
Well, you're getting me in hot water in there, but no, I think it's a really solid.
Hey, Bill Belichick has talked about that in the past, about liking to see teammates
others
support,
succeed.
Right?
Yeah.
Teammates see others succeed. So I don't know how big of an aspect that is, but Bill Belichick has talked about it before.
Yeah, again, it doesn't mean that you're going to win. The Steelers aren't going to beat the Ravens because they're a good group of guys, but I think they just help you get through an 0-3 start where a lot of teams, it's a fight or flight kind of mode. You're 0-3, your back's against the wall. Either you're going to crumble and fall apart and guys are just going to pack it in, or you're going to come together and rally. And, future remains to be seen. Doesn't mean the Steelers are going to win, but I think they're certainly fighting. And when you have that good group of guys to root for each other, everyone plays hard and everyone has that one common goal, that's how you try to turn around a season. If you don't have that, I don't think you have a chance to turn it around. But I think when you have that, continuity in that group being such a tight-knit unit as a team, all 53 rooting for each other, different position groups rooting for different guys, different, sides of the ball rooting for each other. I think that's really important. It's at least a lot of fun to watch.
You and I are pretty much in the wait-and-see mode as far as this offense goes right now, right? I mean, how much more analysis can we do on what we've seen and what we expect so far?
Yeah, no, I think Baltimore is going to be the best litmus test of the season just based on where the team's at now with Rudolph a couple games in, a little bit of momentum and positivity for this offense. But yeah, I mean, just for the season as a whole, because there's a huge difference between 2-3 if they win and 1-4 if they lose. It's a world of difference, and just facing a much tougher team in Baltimore with, I still think, a defense that can create big plays and a defense that still worries me. I know John talked about the issues that they've had, and hey, he knows them better than I do. But I still think Baltimore can create a lot of problems. So if the Steelers can come out with a game plan and have a winning performance, then I think we'll learn a lot about this offense.
What does a winning game plan though kind of, and we'll talk about this more on Friday, but I mean, you got to know there's going to be more small ball coming.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer. Friday, I'll have a better answer for you. I haven't even gotten the Ravens tape yet just because of how short this week has been. I'll probably start that a little later today. But, yeah, I mean, it's going to have to be, as you said, winning more intermediate, middle of the field. It can't be just Wildcat. It's not going to be nearly as successful as it was against the Bengals. It's about giving Rudolph good reads and making good, smart decisions, not being fooled by all the shifts and motions and coverage disguises the Ravens are definitely going to throw at him. And then defensively, it's about, lane integrity, rush lane integrity, run fits, tackling, being physical, controlling time of possession. Because the Ravens can certainly run the ball. They have a clear identity on offense. And as we've seen, whenever this team plays, teams with good identities, the Patriots, the Seahawks, the 49ers, this defense has struggled. So they gotta form their own identity and be able to win this one.
All right, flipping over to the other side of football, I went through all the sacks and all, and oh Lord, T.J. Watt. The only thing T.J. Watt didn't do on that half sack that he split with Cam Hayward was pull Bobby Hart's heart out of his chest and show it to him. I mean that was about. Class. You want to talk about something that you queue up for a training video? That chop rip that T.J. Watt did, and look, that wasn't the only time he got the best of Bobby Hart in that game. And I think you mentioned this on the podcast the other day, how T.J. Watt has now kind of quit. I don't want to say slowly become, because he's still kind of a young player in the NFL. He's quickly become an elite player, But that said, you would expect him to dominate Bobby Hart the way that he dominated Bobby Hart.
Sure, he did the way that I would expect the Steelers defensive line and front seven to dominate a bad Bengals offensive line. The Baltimore is going to be a much bigger challenge. Going from Bobby Hart to Orlando Brown Jr. is a total difference, night and day. So if he can win against Orlando Brown, then that's even more impressive.
Bud Dupree had his way. He made Andre Smith sit down one time too. I think.
Yeah, did you see that clip I posted?
I don't. What's the acronym for that? But he did it, and then that sack of his, I think, was timed at 2.4 seconds, like the fifth or sixth quickest sack this season.
By anyone or by a Steeler?
By anyone this season.
Wow. Wow.
So far this season, quickest snap to sack time. I think that's what Next Gen Stats has on that. I knew it was quick. I knew when it happened, it quick. I knew it was probably the single best pass rush that Dupree has had during his career. But I think when you go through that rest of the game, correct me if I'm wrong, start to finish, top to bottom, that might have been Bud Dupree's best game of his NFL career.
Yeah, I would at least say that was his best singular pass rush rep of his career, at the very least. I think it was a great game.
Cam Hayward didn't look too bad. I think you got to break down, tell us a little bit about that. And Javon Hargrave, man, go miss that guy for sure. And Stephon Tuitt had a good game. They had a miscommunication on the Bengals did on that first sack by Devin Bush, but last I looked, they all count.
Yep, they all count. And so Bush gets his first sack. Yeah, Hayward just absolutely bullied the rookie left guard, Michael Jordan. We talked about that. To the point where Hayward, I'm pretty sure, and I'll have a clip of this on Twitter in a little bit after we finish up here, I think that he was testing out new moves because every year in camp, I watched Tuitt and Hayward, these one-on-ones, O-line, D-line, late in practice, they're always testing out these spin moves, inside spin, outside spin on DeCastro and Foster, just kind of messing around, I think just trying to see what works. And Hayward actually pulled off a spin move late, actually on the fourth down, that was the pass interference on Hayden, where he got Jordan, and he lost his balance just a little bit, otherwise I think he would have had another sack, but he pulled off a spin move. So when you're just kind of out there testing your moves against a guy, that means you're just dominating him, and Cam Hayward welcomed Michael Jordan to the NFL.
I mean, top to bottom, we like this and have like this front five that the Steelers have, and hopefully the Ravens want to play maybe a little bit more into the Steelers' hands this week and play some heavier packages, right? I would have to think that's what the Steelers are kind of hoping for, those multiple tight end sets to have Hargrave on the field more, to have Vince Williams maybe along with Devin Bush in there, kind of keep their nickels off the field. I mean, obviously there's going to be some instances when that happens, but that at least that element of the Ravens offense you would think matches up well against the Steelers defense, right?
I don't know. I mean, when the Ravens have their big guys on the field, that happened last year where the Ravens really controlled. They got the tight ends involved, and the tight ends are better this year. Andrews and Hurst in their second year making big strides. And if they have their tight ends in, that probably means they're controlling the line of scrimmage, they're running the ball effectively, and they're probably winning the game. So I'd rather them have to spread things out and make Lamar have to throw.
You hope they're in the third and long situations is when you see that.
Yeah. Well,
or second and long.
Yeah, but hopefully they get down early and maybe have to abandon some of that game plan. I don't know. The Ravens' identity is going tight and going heavy, and if I can somehow get them out of that, that's ideal for me. But I know that you're going to see.
Right, but I mean, how do they match up against them at least? I mean, I know we haven't gotten deep into the Ravens' offensive film yet, but I mean, that front five's not bad.
No,
especially with Vince Williams in there against those heavy sets, you would think.
Yeah, that's a good point. But the run defense has still been a little shaky this year for the Steelers. And even the Bengals had some success. They were a pretty poor running team, and they got a couple plays on it too. So, they got to do a better job to still stop the run. They can get after the quarterback for sure, but run defense I still think is a little suspect.
It is easy for us right now, not for you and I specifically, to not be too high on what we observed Monday night defensively, correct?
Yeah, I think you take it in context. Again, I'm happy about the job they've done. I think they've done a good job overall of creating splash plays. But again, as I said, this Ravens game is going to be a litmus test on so many levels. It's going to probably give you the outlook and direction for the season. Was the Bengals game just a product of beating a terrible team, a top 3 draft pick team in the Bengals? Or is this the team righting the ship? I think, how this thing goes Sunday against Baltimore is going to tell you that. Because if they lose and they're back 1-4, we're doom and gloom again.
Right.
We're not laughing anymore.
that Bengals game means absolutely nothing really to me, right? I mean, to me, looking back on it, the way the Bengals played in that game, and what the hell is Andy Dalton doing late in that game, in the red zone there, trying to throw against that quarters coverage? I mean, against
I think
cover
he checked
four.
out. I'm sorry to cut you off. Because you had the gift of his frustration after that one sack. I think he was just done with that game.
He was pretty done with that game.
He's just like, get me out of here.
Did you see even early in the game? Go back and look at that Bush sack too. Early in the game, Bush got up, looked like he was trying to carry Andy Dalton off to the airport as a piece of luggage.
Like I think Andy Dalton. I saw Andy Dalton on the sideline saying, "Cut me, Mick. Cut me, Mick." Like he was just like, "Get me the heck out of here! What are you guys doing?" He was so pissed.
Right. So you don't mean check out of the play? He had checked out of the game.
Yeah. No. Okay. No, he checked out of the game. He just he didn't care. He was putting the controller down, kind of thing. Like he was really. Because that one sack, what was it? What sack was that? The Hargrave one that got him, or I forget which one it was. There were 8 of them, but he threw the football away and he just walked off the field. Just went to the sideline and just said, "I'm done."
Like Mom had called, and the pizza pockets are ready, man.
Yeah.
Because you go back and you look at that interception by Barron. I mean, what the hell was that throw?
I think he was trying to throw it to the tight end and it sailed. I don't know. I mean, at that point, the game was over.
Yeah, absolutely was. I guess what I'm getting at is fun to joke about that Bengals game now. Ha, hee, ho, ho. But what else did we learn defensively about the Steelers defense in that game?
Yeah, I think it was more of the same. But again, to the larger point, if they lose to this Ravens team, as you said, the laughing's over. We're going back to talking about who gets fired and why Tomlin sucks. We're getting those kind of emails. So, it'll be considered a fluke if the Steelers lose this one, especially if they lose by, 2 possessions.
All right, so what you're saying, there's not much analysis left to do on the Bengals game right now.
No, but again, I know it's a small point, but just kind of the team stuff, rallying around each other. Even I had the tweet of it, the Zach Banner hug after a successful field goal or extra point. One of my favorite moments, Zach Banner going out in the field and congratulating everybody for a successful field goal.
Shall we get to the email machine?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, this one's from Yahoo. Hey guys, the defense is really starting to come together. Fitzpatrick is definitely looks as advertised with the Ravens coming to town. Jackson's ability to escape pressure from the pocket partly enables their receivers to break off routes and have broken coverages. How important will Fitzpatrick and Edmonds be this week? Would you expect to see Edmonds play close to the line? What would be the best way to contain Jackson while not letting receivers break off for a splash play? How can the Steelers prevent Jackson attacking the middle of the field with the tight ends? That appears to still be the weakness for the defense. Thanks, guys, for the excellent Steelers coverage. Look, I understand, and hopefully what Alex and I just said is it's exciting about what we saw the defense do this past week, but we're not throwing the parade just yet. We want to see how they get past these next 2 games here defensively for the Steelers. As far as your thoughts on Jackson and all go, you might have to sacrifice, a little bit of pressure this week by just making sure you keep Jackson contained within the pocket. The last thing I want him doing is getting outside of contain and then like the email says here, giving those wide receivers time to play backyard ball there. I think that's kind of the worst thing that happens. So, I think you want to be careful with what you do on the edge. And as we saw against the game against the Seahawks, right? And Jackson's a lot faster than Russell Wilson. You better have some integrity in the middle of that field, especially if you doing any kind of safeties with the backs or cornerbacks with their backs turned kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean, you asked a lot of questions there, and they're good questions. Who was that? Yahoo? Who sent that in?
It just says Yahoo. Yeah.
All right. Well, fair enough. But I mean, it's hard to stop everything. You're talking about stopping the run game, stopping Jackson from running, stopping the outside receivers from winning, stopping Jackson from attacking the middle of the field. I mean, there's always going to be a weakness to the defense. I still want to get pressure. I point taken about what you're saying there. You don't want to give big escape lanes for Jackson, but I may do more one gapping and less two-way goes, a lineman or a linebacker that can rush inside or outside gap. I may do more one ways just to kind of keep everybody in their their lane, making sure you're not getting stuff, big openings created. I probably play more zone coverage to keep eyes on the football. So the times where Lamar does want to run, you have vision on the football. Man coverage, eyes off the football does lend itself to letting quarterbacks run. So it's a delicate balancing act. I'll probably have a better answer for you for Friday's show once they get through some of the Ravens tape. But it certainly will not be easy.
Here's the thing. He's been sacked 10 times already this season, and as we saw last year too, he has ball security issues in the past. So, man, you better be trying to paw at that ball if you get close to him. My biggest concern, though, is him breaking contain here, because we're talking about a quarterback that already has 36 carries for 238 yards on the season with a long of 29. So I'm sure he's going to be instructed if it's not there and you think you can use your legs to get after it. Hopefully with some of these tight ends, size disadvantage definitely for Devin Bush against a guy like Mark Andrews. And Mark Andrews is their leading receiver right now. So their offense, their passing game, probably going to start with him and then work towards the outside. And there's no way you can let Marquise Brown run free the way he did those first couple of weeks against Miami and Arizona.
Yeah, and really, I think the way I would scheme it up from a pass rush standpoint is your edge guys, Dupree and Watt, are going to be more contained, and you really got to bank on that interior line winning, because as John Eisenberg said, a guy like Bradley Bozen's probably their weakest offensive lineman. I think I've seen him get, pushed out of the club before. I think against the Chiefs he got bull rushed on his back or something like that. So really, I would have that interior line collapse the pocket, the outside guys contained. I think that's how you win and get pressure.
All right, I just had one pop in the email machine from Matt Baker. He writes, really enjoyed his show, first off, and I'm glad I found the podcast. Thanks, Matt. I was curious how many snaps Ola played week 4 against the Bengals. What many? What was it, 10? 11?
I can look. It was about that, though.
Played week 4 versus the Bengals. I thought I noticed him on the field, but wasn't sure. You did notice him, Matt. Oh, and
11 snaps.
Barron wore the green dot, right?
Did he? I still hadn't gone back and checked.
Yeah.
I figured you would. Yeah, I still didn't see where Dirty Red got 3 snaps. I know that's listed. I haven't. Seen
it was late. It was late.
I checked late. Yeah, I still saw Barry.
I know I saw him for at least
you
one.
Did?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fair. Again, Ola 11 snaps against the Bengals.
All right. Matt goes on to say, I thought I noticed him on the field, but wasn't sure. Also on the Minka trade, I look at the trade of us getting a first-round safety a year sooner. It also helps him build chemistry in the defense beside Edmonds for the next couple years, since we are going to be losing Sean Davis. Look, I think that's the way people should be looking at it too, Matt. The further we get away from this, Alex is still going to be upset about that first-round pick, I'm sure, and I think we'll have to wait and see how this thing boils down. But if this thing turns out being a top 10 first-round pick, there are going to be a lot of angry folks just because of the results bias that gets thrown into there.
Well, yeah, like I said before, I think this trade won't be judged until you see what happens with what pick the Steelers have. But I think it'll be understandable for fans and the national media to be more critical if this turns out to be a top 10 pick than it is if they're picking somewhere in the late teens, early 20s kind of deal. That's fair to say.
Okay, let's see. I think we hit that one from Tom. Let me see if I can find one from, Brian Zimmerman. Zimmerman has one. I've been trying to pay attention to punt return formations. I wanted to ask to see what you thought about this. Whenever Switzer is back there, Whenever Switzer is back there, they have one man on the Gunners, and they almost seem to let them have a free run. When Johnson was back for his return, they had 2 men on the Gunners. I'm guessing he's talking about the Vice there. Mm-hmm. It didn't matter, as it was a 29-yard punt, but it seems like whenever Switzer catches a punt, he almost has to fair catch it because he has 1 or 2 guys already in his face. Not sure if I'm reading too much into it, but from what I've seen, he isn't even having opportunity for a return. His second follow-up email is, and of course on that punt they have two on the Gunners for Switzer, and he's able to get a return only to re-kick.
Yeah,
I guess he was maybe watching this in game. I don't know.
No, I noted that during the game. Yeah, I mean, it hasn't happen every time, but generally it feels like Switzer's back there for the safe return, either backed up in your own end when you're sitting at your own 10-yard line, or when they want to attack for a pump block, as they did when the Bengals were backed up near their own goal line. Switzer was back there for those, and whenever they want a chance for an actual return and they're not going heavy with the rush, Deontay Johnson's back there. So I think that is a pretty fair assessment. Basically, Switzer's the ball security, decision-making kind of guy. When they don't expect a return, Johnson's the guy out there when they do expect a chance for a return to hope to get a bigger play.
Not doing so well this year as far as gunners and jammers and all, right?
Yeah, Artie's been particularly rough, especially against the 49ers. I just get annoyed sometimes when these jammers line up inside leverage and they allow an inside release. Like, I know it's tough because you're covering so much space, but the return game, as usual, has been not much going on.
I want to real quick before I forgot. I want to throw this stat out at you. Through 4 games last season, the first 4 games last season, the Steelers defense had 13 sacks and 7 takeaways. Through the first 4 games this season, Alex, they have 14 sacks, 1 more, and 9 takeaways, 2 more. So a little bit of positive there. And here's the thing. They've had short fields. What is that? I mean, we've actually seen some of that this year, and that better damn continue.
Well, you're scaring me here because you're telling me what happened last year, and I know what happened the rest of the year after those first 4 weeks. They didn't get any turnovers.
Right. So, I mean, you better keep this pace up with the sacks and the takeaways, and B, you better – I think they have something like 26 or 27 or 28 points off of turnovers so far this year. Wow. They're gonna have to set Mason up on some short fields. I mean, you can continue to play this small ball if you get some short fields to work on. The big concern is what happens if we get in a situation, especially a team like Baltimore that can pin you back in a heartbeat with their punter. What if you have 8 drives that start at your own 25 or back? That's where you really get more concerned about this offense.
Steelers 7th in the NFL in average starting field position, starting at their own 30.
It feels like it, too. It feels good,
They were 32nd last year. They're 4-yard improvement from last year. That's big.
That is big. Mark Chapman writes in, Duckman. Uh-oh.
No. Oh, no.
Uh-oh. No. Oh, no.
All right, hit me.
Mark writes in, our best hope is on the sidelines tonight.
Oh, man.
Give him a shot. Couldn't be any worse than running the Wildcat.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
Let's see. That was pre-game here, Monday night. I think surprisingly after a win, maybe it's because maybe our listeners are on a short week as well too here. But we did power through quite a few emails the last couple of days here. We are working on back-to-back podcast here on days as well too. So with that, I guess we won't have a 2-hour show today, will we?
Nope. I think that's right. Maybe we'll shoot for that Friday. We'll see what happens.
All right. But a lot of people want you to keep me in line, Alex. When it comes to that, but a lot of people just say take the watch off.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about times. Content is a lot more important than the quality quantity thing.
All right, our thanks again to John Eisenberg for joining us. Make sure you reach out to him on Twitter at @BMoreEisenberg, and make sure you go to Amazon.com and look up John Eisenberg and see if you like any of his books for Christmas at all, and help him out. He's been a long time friend of this show for sure. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. You can follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email this show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and you want to donate to the cause, go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button, upright navigational bar. If you want an ad-free version to SteelersDepot.com as well, a lot of people have taken advantage of that. Go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button, upright navigational bar. For $25 for 1 calendar year, you can have an ad-free version of the site. And once again, that's been popular with listeners and viewers of the site as well, too. Alex and I will be back on Friday with a lot of Ravens tape underneath our belt to give you a thorough and hopefully proper breakdown of the forthcoming game against the Ravens. That'll take place Sunday at Heinz Field at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. And with that, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.